Okay, welcome back, composers, arrangers, professionals, anyone who would like to know about the bassoon and the bassoon family. Let's go. All right, here's some general properties of the bassoon. Of course, we know the names of the various names of the instrument in different languages. Bassoon, basson, fagot, fagotto, meaning bundle of wood. Also interesting that in French, basson literally means low sound, sort of like how hautbois meant high wood. Again, it's a very literal translation. If flute is the soprano and oboe is the alto and clarinet covers some of the alto range and some of the tenor range, well, of course, the bassoon will be completing that choir in terms of the bass range. Like the clarinet, like the oboe, but not like the flute in terms of how it flares out at the end. We have a conical instrument. So now that we've seen every family of the woodwind choir, we can say that mostly we have conical bores, meaning they flare out at the end. Flute is the only instrument in that choir that has a cylindrical bore, and you can hear that is one aspect that contributes towards the overall sound. Okay, if clarinet and saxophone are members of the single reed family, well, of course, the bassoon and the contrabassoon are members of the double reed family. In fact, once a year you could go to the double reed convention and you could hear all of the oboists and bassoonists of the world, or many of them anyway, descend on usually a university or perhaps a hotel, and sometimes in the United States, sometimes out of the United States, in a convention, and where they're selling their reeds, where they're performing for each other, where they're lecturing. So that is the double reed convention. Okay, basic range of the instrument. So on the bassoon, you're going to have the low B flat. And really, we really should say B flat is the lowest note. Occasionally there are pieces that call for extending that range lower. It doesn't really exist. You have to kind of stuff the instrument to make it longer. It's not really worth it. Or actually, I believe what they do is cup their instrument on their leg or something like that. I would not think of that as the low note A. We really are talking about the B flat. However, as we'll see, the contrabassoon is a bit different. In terms of the high range, it's up there, isn't it? Okay, it really goes quite high. So what is that? 1, 2, 3.5 octaves. That's an impressive range. It's even bigger than the cello range. It goes lower and higher, depending on the cellist. In terms of the dynamic curve, you can think of this as analogous to the oboe, which means that it is a diminuendo to the top, meaning that the lowest parts of the range will be quite fat, thick, hard to control the dynamics. Then we get into a more expressive range. Then we get into a thinner register that's harder to control in the high range. It would be tough to ask, let's say, to play fortissimo in that high register and to cut through an orchestra. Well, that would be very difficult. Of course, you could say play solo. Right? So that's the C above middle C, and that actually works beautifully. Okay, so the extreme high range, it's very playable, but we should be careful about dynamics. The lowest register, here I have some fun graphics for you. You could think of it as dry, brittle. True pianissimos are almost impossible. The mid-range is more horn-like, and it blends well with other instruments in these passages. It really is true. There are times when you hear a bassoonist play in its mid-register and you think to yourself, is there a saxophone in this ensemble? or perhaps you hear, is there a French horn here? And it can sometimes fool you into thinking it's a different instrument in this mid register. High range, more focused, nasally, does not penetrate well, as you've heard already, and it necessitates a more delicate accompaniment, so something to be wary of. It is a very agile instrument. You could ask it to do all sorts of florid type writing. Okay, just as we've seen with all of the instruments of the woodwind choir, the flute, the oboe, the clarinet, and the bassoon, they're all quite capable of leaping, jumping, arpeggiating, quick scale-like figures, trills, grace notes. All of these things are the kind of bread and butter of orchestral writing or solo writing or chamber writing. Okay, for the woodwind choir. Okay, so this is great news. You have a lot of options here. Like the oboe, usually we're talking about single tonguing versus double tonguing. Try double tonguing with something stuck on your teeth. It's very difficult to do. Basically, if you're wondering how fast you can do it, well, you can be singing to yourself, ta 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 ta. How fast can you single tongue? Ta 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 ta. That's about as fast as I can do it. Perhaps a bassoonist could go a bit faster, but that would be a good frame to keep in mind. Ta 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 ta. That would be something like that would be playable. Any faster, and we're talking about something that's not really idiomatic for the instrument. Okay, as we've seen with other instruments, sometimes a certain part of the register can be problematic. If you think of the break for the clarinet, that can be quite difficult. The low notes of the flute, the extreme low, you have to be careful about certain trills that are just very difficult. Same goes for the bassoon. Oops, there we go. So down in this low register, you don't want to be writing as much as you think it. Oh, well, that should work. Well, the fingerings are so awkward that you should stay away from that. In fact, if you want that kind of sound in that register, that might be a good reason to use the contrabassoon. So you'd write that up an octave, and it actually would be quite playable on the contrabassoon in that specific register. Speaking of which, the contrabassoon, well, I told you it has a slightly different register. Really, most do have that low A extension. That's an octave lower. Okay, if you're wondering which note that is, let's say on the piano, that is the very lowest note, the extreme low A. So that's how we can get into that extreme range. It's almost very tough to hear that tonal center of that pitch. You can almost hear the vibrations of the frequency itself. It's so slow. It's not to say you shouldn't use it. I think it can have a great effect, especially when doubled with another instrument. Let's say the double bass is there. You could double it with with the bass clarinet up. You'd have to write it up an octave, of course, or perhaps the bassoon's up 2 octaves. So that low A would add to a kind of fundamental. Think of it as your subwoofer if you know anything about speakers. Okay, it is slightly less agile, especially in that low register. However, I've heard plenty of contrabassoon solos, especially in a modern context where composers are trying to extend the idea of what's possible for the instrument. As I said already, it can add an unobtrusive pitch center to the low, let's say, string-based passages. So you'll often see the two doubled. Remember that both the contrabassoon and the double bass are transposing instruments. So if you write, let's say, a C on the bass staff, it will come out an octave lower, which is great because you have that. If you want that extreme range, but let's say you don't want it too overly obtrusive or overly accented, like the regular old bassoon would be, well, that's a good reason to bring out that contrabassoon. Okay. And we'll listen in class to a couple of examples, Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade, which have so many great woodwind solos, often the same melody, but those are good to come back to. And we'll listen to the Tchaikovsky Sixth Symphony, which is a good demonstration of the low register. Okay, for contrabassoon excerpts, we'll listen to the Brahms Symphony No. 4, which has a nice exposed bass line. And of course, you know this solo well, the Paul Dukas Sorcerer's Apprentice. So there you have it. There's some good excerpts for you, which we'll listen to in class. So I hope this gave you a good start to the basics of writing for the instrument, and we'll try to apply those well to a project coming up. All right, I hope you have a great day. See you soon.